This is the Franchise QB Podcast, where we empower entrepreneurs to win big in franchising. We huddle up weekly to educate our audience about the most successful small business model ever created, franchising.
Welcome to the Franchise QB Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Halpern, a 20-year industry veteran and entrepreneur. My mission is for listeners to achieve their American dreams of creating wealth and independence through franchise ownership. Every week, we speak with franchisees, franchisors, or vendors that support the industry. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started. Joining us in the huddle today is Mike Aiello, Director of Franchise Development with Homefront Brands and Top Rail Fence. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you having me on today.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me. So I'm going to talk you up a little bit. So after you graduated college, you had a BBA in finance and entrepreneurship. That's a really interesting dual major. You became the director of operations for Mosquito Squad. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. That's a franchise that's been featured on the show before. I had Jason Henshaw on, and it's been on our podcast. And then you became one of the founding employees of Homefront Brands, which is a home services platform franchisor. Homefront Brands at that time was just an idea when you joined, and today it's among the fastest growing property services companies in North America. So that's really cool. So before we dive into Homefront Brands and Top Rail, tell us a little bit about your backgrounds and how you eventually found Homefront Brands.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate the kind words, Mike. A little bit more background on me. So I actually, I was a Division I football player in college at a school called Elon University.
Okay.
That's actually where I met Zach Duden, who's now the Chief Growth Officer of Homefront Brands. But before that, my uncle, Tom Heineman, actually was an early adopter of Mosquito Squad in northern New Jersey. He's been in that business for about 12 years. Today, it's totally changed his life. He's a $1 million guy on the bottom line, and
awesome.
Like I said, just totally changed his life. And I got to see that over the course of 12 years.
Do you know how he got into Mosquito Squad? Like, what was he doing before he became an owner?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, Mike. He was a plumber by trade. So he was not an astute business builder. He had never built a business before. And to be honest, when he, started going into the process with Mosquito Squad, me, my dad, we were skeptical. We were like, who's going to pay for, a service like that?
Right.
And it took him about 3 years to really get it ramped up. And again, it's a lower ticket size model, but a reoccurring revenue model. But built it up over the course of 12 years. And like I said, it's totally changed his life. I got to see it change my cousin's lives as well, from a financial perspective. And, if you ask him today, he could not have done what he's done without the franchise model.
Yeah. I mean, just the fact that he's a top owner doing millions in sales with that product is really impressive. Not a lot of people can get to that scale. So, hats off to him. And you mentioned you ran into, was it Zach Duden when you were at Elon?
Yeah.
Okay, because I know that Jeff, his father, he played ball for Appalachian State back in the day. And this is a true story, this weekend, I'm going to Appalachian State for the very first time in Boone, North Carolina, because my 18-year-old was admitted there as a student. We're going to check out the campus.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful campus. I've been up there a number of times. Actually, when I was back at Elon, we played App State at least once when I was in college. So, beautiful university in the mountains in Boone. So
I'm a JMU graduate, so now that we're with App State in the Sun Belt East, it's like a rivalry. But I'm excited to go check out the campus. So let's take us back to 2014. So you kind of work as director of ops with your uncle. You kind of understand the franchise business. So tell the audience kind of the origin story of Top Rail Fence and your involvement with Homefront Brands and really what's kind of evolved over the past 11 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, Zach and Jeff Duden had approached me with the idea back in 2020. And I actually had said to them, I was like, hey, if you guys ever have an opportunity to be in business together, let me know. I'll clean the bathrooms. I'll do whatever you guys need me to do. And they took me up on it, funny enough. And I had not to clean the bathrooms, thank God, but took an entry-level position. I was employee number 2 down here at Homefront Brands. And I'll be very transparent. Everything that Jeff described to me in my interview about almost 4 years ago has come to fruition over the last 3 years.
That's
so
great.
Tons of exciting things that have happened here. Just to give the Homefront brand background, we started with realistically nothing. And today we have about 250 franchisees spread out across the 4 different brands. Collectively, they own almost 700 territories in 2 different countries. And what's very nice about Homefront Brands is because we're in the property service space, we can get people open and trading very quickly. So about 93% of our franchisees are all open and trading over the last 3 years.
Wow. Yeah, I know that I've heard about Jeff's history with Urbana Clean and building that business. I was fortunate enough to be a speaker on the same panel as him about 2 years ago. And it was just really impressive to hear his story and that he parlayed all that knowledge and success into founding Homefront Brands. So I can see, how he's kind of stuck true to his word and built this company, from the ground up over the past 4 years with those learnings from being in the restoration space.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as it relates directly to Top Rail, so basically at Homefront Brands, we look for property service type businesses that we believe in simple terms are franchisable. We'll partner with the founders of a business like that. We'll enhance their model and we'll launch it to the franchise market. So it's exactly what we did with Top Rail. It was a fencing business founded back in 2015 by Tucker Berry and Chris Herman, 2 brother-in-laws. Started a fencing operation, did very, very well. Actually expanded to a few markets in the Southeast and kind of realized they had something that was replicable, which is what led them to partner with Homefront Brands and bring that brand to the national market. So we've been developing Top Rail since January of 2023. So about 2 years of franchise development. We currently have about 64 owners spread out across the country. Again, majority, about 95% of those owners are all open and trading for the last 2 years.
That's awesome. Well, congrats on that success. 64 owners in a short period of time is great. So tell us a little bit more about the Top Rail brand. What are the actual product offerings that a Top Rail fence owner can provide to their customers?
Yeah, great question, Mike. So there's really 3 main services that we offer. The biggest service line where 95% of jobs are going to come from is fence installations. Now, we offer any type of fence product you can think of: wood, vinyl, steel, chain link, aluminum. Any type of product we can get our hands on. So fence installations makes up a majority of the business. 2 other service lines, though, that we're very excited about, and the franchisees are as well, is actually staining of a wooden fence. So that's something we recently launched about 3 months ago to the franchise network. Guys love that service. It's a high margin, easy service that they can offer to homeowners. And because fencing is usually a one and done service, when you have a wood fence installed on a property, we now have a workflow set up where after 6 months, that homeowner is going to get dripped into a staining campaign. So fence installations, staining, and then the other service line we're very excited about is railing. When I say railing, it could actually be interior of buildings and commercial buildings like steel or aluminum railing, but franchisees have also started offering railing on like wooden decks. So wood railing that goes around a deck or even stairs that go down from a deck. So yeah, main services are going to be fence installations, staining, and railing.
Yeah, no, I love that because you're going to get those big tickets on those jobs, but the one and done aspect I know can be a challenge. So the idea of having like a sticky maintenance concept where and they need it. Like a lot of customers just don't want to get around to it. But if the company that they know and they trust that they worked with says, hey, in 6 months, we're coming by, we're going to get this fence looking brand new, then it's like, of course, I want to maintain this investment I made. So that's a really exciting piece because, a lot of candidates that are looking at fencing, they're like, well, yeah, I understand it's a big ticket, but where's the recurring revenue?
Absolutely.
Yeah, very cool. So let's talk a little bit about the customer split. I mean, I know there's residential applications. Tell me a little bit about B2B. Like, do you do like a lot of commercial jobs? Is it a thing where when they launch, the marketing's turned on to build the consumer side and then they focus more on B2B? How does that work for a new owner? How are they how do you suggest that they launch with those 2 categories?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so as franchisees launch, a majority of your initial customers are going to be single family home residential customers. Now, we have had franchisees have great success on the commercial side. A couple examples of that. Actually, if you know of Urban Air is a inside amusement park, another franchise model. We had a franchisee down in Tampa, Florida, do an aluminum fence in the inside of an Urban Air that went around a racetrack. So that's a pretty cool commercial opportunity. When we look at our item 19, the highest ticket that a franchisee had closed in 2023 was a $309,000 commercial job.
Whoa. Let's talk about that right now. What's a 309,000 commercial job look like? Like, was that an airport?
No, so it was actually, so airports and agricultural fences are fair game as well. As a matter of fact, our franchisee out in Salt Lake City, I think, just put up a agricultural fence that stretched almost, I think, over 2 miles on a big property. Now, again, these are kind of unique opportunities for franchisees, but we still do them. Yeah. So the $309,000 job was most likely an HOA project, a new development that was put up. But HOA presidents, even home builders, those are great referral partners for our franchisees. And in their first 90 days of becoming a franchise owner with us, as the business ramps, we actually identify specific referral marketing partners in their area and coach them and encourage them to go visit those people. Let them know who you are. See if there's synergies with what they do and what we do. So that's how that franchisee, he's actually right in our backyard in South Charlotte. That's how he landed that $309,000 job, was visiting a home builder or actually visiting an HOA president, introducing himself. And obviously it went a long way for those people.
Yeah, that's great. Love to hear stories like that. And I think that's like inspirational across the system. Like franchisees talk, and once someone like actually does that, it's like, okay, well then I can too. Let me go out there and build relationships with similar people that can kind of lead me to these kind of jobs. It's like you want to hit home runs, you want to hit singles, and if you're doing both, then you have a real successful business. So let's talk a little bit about the team. When an owner comes on board, who do they need to launch successfully? And then I'm curious about, the composition of the employment. Are they W-2s? Are they 1099s? Are they a mix of both? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what's really nice about this business is that it requires low fixed overhead to get started. So the nature of the business, we train our owners on how to install fences. So they are subject matter experts on that side of the business. Although we do not advise owners to get on their hands and knees and build fences themselves. That would be pretty silly. We also do not advise new owners to go out and hire W-2 installers right off the bat. As a matter of fact, the 60, 65 guys that I mentioned, all of them use subcontractors to do the installations for them. Okay. So the strategy as an owner-operator becomes much more of a quality control position. Coordinating with the subs, coordinating with the homeowner, making sure that production's up to par and making sure that the homeowner's happy. And again, our thought with that is it keeps your fixed overhead very low. Your job costs stay relatively fixed. So typically owners can easily identify margin from job to job. Just to kind of mention too, there's 3 main hats in this business is kind of what we categorize them. There's your owner hat, there's a sales hat, and there's your production hat. Now, most owners will choose, not everybody, but most owners will choose to be an owner-operator up front. And for whatever reason, I think it has to do with our profiles that, candidates who have become franchisees. But a lot of the time, the owner will wear the owner hat and wear the sales hat to begin with. In that model, we would encourage them to hire an operations person up front. What is that operations person going to do? They're going to work with the subcontractors. They're going to coordinate with them. They might even be on job sites with them daily. They're going to be ordering materials, managing inventory, things like that. And that allows the owner to focus on driving sales in the business. If the owner, and we have a handful of them, if an owner-operator is sales adverse, the first hire we're going to encourage them to make is a salesperson. Really nice thing about hiring a salesperson up front is you can make that person heavily commission-based. It's very popular in the home improvement space. So even our owners that have now continued to build out their team and hired another salesperson, they make that person highly incentivized to sell because they are heavily commission-based.
Oh, very cool. So is there thresholds that you recommend volume-wise when they need to add another set of trusted subcontractors to kind of satisfy the jobs that a franchise owner books, or is that kind of case by case?
Yeah, that's a great question. It can be case by case. We do have benchmarks and thresholds, right, that we monitor. Our franchise performance coaches monitor with the franchisees. What's great about this business is you want to be doing an install a day. Now, why we like the subcontractor 1099 model is because the fencing industry happens to be very fragmented, meaning that it's very disorganized. There's local competition everywhere. And mom and pop businesses, and I'm sure there's some in every market,
Right.
that have been around for 10, 15 years, typically they built their business in a W-2 model. So they have W-2 installers where they're now at the will of those installation crews. They can only do so much. Our model is a little bit different with the subcontractors because our owners in the top 20% will build out a network of 3 to 5 subcontract crews to bring back their turnaround time. So they're not getting booked out months and months, and they can continue to add volume to their top line.
Very cool. So what characteristics do you seek in a franchise owner? You mentioned that, sales is generally one of the hats that an owner wears. Are there certain skills or attributes that you feel kind of translate to a successful owner in this model?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll take a chance on anybody with any background, but the two main candidate profiles that we look for, number one is folks that have come from a background in corporate sales, white collar sales, like technology sales, med device sales, pharmaceutical sales. For whatever reason, those guys are very skilled sellers, and selling a fence is very different from what I just mentioned. But those guys are typically extroverted, so they're comfortable getting in front of a homeowner, and people come from that side of the corporate America. They're typically competing with guys that are recognized as blue collar guys in the home improvement side. So by looking clean cut, professional, being a part of a national brand like Top Rail, that does hold weight for a homeowner who's trying to spend thousands of dollars to have a fence installed on their property. They want to give that business to somebody they know, like, and trust. The other profile that we look for is somebody that's built a business before, or somebody that's used to managing teams, because they're managing subs. They're typically managing an operations person up front, and we can train really anybody to do the sales piece. I mentioned this too. Out of the 60, 65 guys we have out there, none of them had any experience in the fencing industry prior to getting into this business.
Yeah, that's one thing I talk to candidates about a lot. It's like when you get into a franchise, the franchisor has figured out the blueprint and you have to execute it. So you don't have to be an expert in the discipline that you're investing in. Can it help? Sometimes get in your own way if you already feel like you know everything. And it's like, why do you need a franchise system if you've already done that before? So I do find that some of the top candidates that I work with that have success, they kind of go in with an open mind. Okay, let me find one that has a really proven model, and then let me just follow that. And, that's how they excel, is they put in the work to kind of go downstream and collaborate with the franchisor instead of trying to, reinvent the wheel, which wouldn't make sense to get into a system, right?
Absolutely. And you know what, Mike? I'll mention one other thing, because this is relative and something I've picked up on over the last few months working with Top Rail so closely. What I really love about this business for candidates, you don't have to be special. You just have to be what most people are not. Consistent, determined, willing to work for it, listen to the activities that we coach you to do. And if you do that in the franchise model, really in any business, the odds are stacked, pretty high that you're going to be successful. So again, consistent, deliberate actions.
Sometimes you can't teach those fundamentals. And when you're vetting a candidate, you want to make sure that they have that grit, determination. It's not just all about the money. It's about how can I collaborate with people and build a big business and put in the work and kind of succeed. So, home services, as we know, that's what you guys do. It's really flourished since 2020. What are some of the reasons that an entrepreneur would select Top Rail Fence as their franchisor?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest reasons why I think people have pivoted, and a lot of people from the white collar space have pivoted into the home service, property service space, is number one, you can get open very quickly. You're not waiting for a fitness studio to be built out over the course of 8 to 12 months. You're not really waiting for anything. Right? We make the commitment when somebody signs their franchise agreement, we can get them open in 90 days or less. Now, that sounds quick to some people, right? So one of the first things we do is actually set their open date, and we'll work backwards from that date. But again, people like this business because they can get open and trading very, very quickly in less than 90 days. So that's reason number one. Number two would be that it's low overhead to get started. I'll relate back to my uncle's business, and it took him time to get there. But in Mosquito Squad, he now has to hire about 100 seasonal technicians every year. And that's a challenge for him, managing those people, finding those people year over year, and retaining the good ones year over year. In this business, low fixed overhead is what's key to know. Even the profit loss statement in our item 19 that we can talk about here in a minute, but his team, he did over $4 million in gross sales in 2023. You have the owner in that business who does overflow sales. He has 2 full-time sales representatives and a director of operations. That's what he's got on his W-2 side. Obviously, he's working with crews of subcontractors. That's the nature of the business. We know you're going to need those. But again, to run a $4 million business with 4 to 5 people on payroll is pretty attractive to most guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really great economics. I want to talk about that more in a moment. So you mentioned there were over 60 owners in the system. How many territories does that translate to?
Yeah, great question. So collectively, we've awarded about 190 territories spread out across the country. So our system average comes out to about 2.9 territories per owner, so about 3 territories per owner.
Okay. And do you have a ballpark of how many of those will be launching in 2025?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we have a training going on here next week. I believe we have 3, actually, not next week, the following week, and we have 3 new owners coming out the door there. We actually just awarded somebody else recently. So what's nice is we will have trainings at least 6 to 8 times a year, but we will have more by demand of franchise owners. Obviously, in this this time of year, we're right away from March. There's a lot of people out there that are looking to make a change in 2025, and there's still time to get open and get trading before the summer even hits here.
Yeah, I know that a lot of new franchise owners don't want to take on that huge brick and mortar construction project where they have to wait 3 to 6 months to identify a site, and then they have to hire a contractor to build out the space, and then they have to get permits to open and all that. So what's kind of cool about Top Rail is once they sign their franchise agreement, go through training, they're launched, which is great. So let's talk a little bit about that investment. What does the item 7 look like for the range of a Top Rail franchise owner?
That's a great question, Mike. And again, like you said, another benefit of a property service type business like Top Rail is, the investment level is typically going to be much lower than a fitness studio or a QSR restaurant. Those things can be hundreds of thousands of dollars or even close to $1 million. Something like Top Rail is actually, in my opinion, a bit more affordable for people in North America. So everything needed to get a Top Rail fence started, and this is everything in the item 7, from your initial franchise fee, any tools, equipment, technology, insurance, grand open marketing spend. I mean, we do go as far to include things like additional funds in the bank as well. But everything included, and things about the item 7, I never give the bare minimum low end, and I'll never give the maximum high end. It's typically going to be somewhere in the range. Right. So everything typically anywhere between 130 and 170 to get started.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a really affordable item 7 for a franchise concept. That's great. So you did kind of hint at item 19 before. What kind of financial performance representations can you share with us today?
Absolutely. And I will just let everybody know, as we get closer to April, we will have a new franchise disclosure document coming out with some really exciting information updated in the item 19. But because we're so new, the information we share is from 2023 is a bit limited. But like I said, specific to franchisees, we did have the highest ticket or the highest sale that somebody did in 2023, a franchisee who had been open for at least 6 months, closed that $309,000 job. The average ticket size across the system for franchisees that had been open for at least 6 months was right around $6,500. I think it was $6,497, which is in line with industry average. Now, average ticket is going to depend a little bit more on market, right? The average ticket in Atlanta is different from Los Angeles and New York. So that's always key to know. What is most exciting about the item 19, though, is the profit loss statement that we share from the affiliate-owned location, the original founder's location. And what?
You guys share a full P&L?
We share a full
of
P&L
the affiliate?
in there. There's actually
that's awesome.
2 profit loss statements in there. The Group A P&L is what I encourage most candidates to focus on because it's 4 territories that are all contiguous to one another, meaning that they're adjacent and they're run like a traditional franchise location. So in that P&L from 2023, and what's key to know is that location is still growing, but in 2023, that location did over $4 million in gross sales. What's incredible is even after cost of goods sold, after disclosed expenses, and even after franchisor fees, That owner showed an adjusted profit of 15.3%, which came out to just over $606,000.
That's really
now,
impressive.
I always want to mention too with that, because there is a footnote in the item 19 that translates directly to that P&L. That owner paid himself $200,000 of W-2 income that was not reported in the P&L.
Yeah, that's healthy. That is a healthy business. Very cool. And the other one that you show in like Group B, that's a non-contiguous market, so it wouldn't really look like what a franchise owner typically would develop.
Exactly. Yeah, it's two territories in South Carolina, a territory in Tennessee, a territory in North Carolina. So again, just from an expense standpoint, not run like a traditional franchise location.
Yeah. I mean, those numbers are fantastic, especially when you're talking about getting to 4 million in revenue when you're investing 150 to 200,000, give or take. I mean, that's a really interesting way to ramp up quickly, and the margins are clearly there. So, that's great. So you've shared a lot with us today, Mike. Anything else you want to add to the mix before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered a lot, Mike. There's a lot of exciting things going on at Top Rail Fence. And, I know I mentioned the 60, 65 owners. We still have plenty of hot markets that are available. All of New Jersey, all of New York, majority of Pennsylvania, territory still available in Ohio, all of California, Huntsville, Alabama is another sweet spot market, Fayetteville, Arkansas. So still tons of available markets in the Southeast, the Midwest, and the Northeast, and out West as well. So I don't want people to be alarmed by the number of franchisees that we have. There are plenty of open territories that are very attractive for this business.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of really juicy markets, a lot of white space, and hopefully some folks listening will contact you to learn more. So if anyone listening wants to connect with Mike and his team to learn about becoming a franchise owner with Top Rail Fence, contact me at franchiseqb.com or on X at QBFranchiseQB. I'll get you guys connected. Thank you so much, Mike, for taking the time to get in the huddle to discuss Top Rail Fence with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Mike. I really appreciate the time, and I look forward to working with candidates that are interested in Top Rail for the future.
Feelings are mutual. Thanks, Mike. Thank you for listening to the Franchise QB podcast, where you're at the helm of your future as a franchise owner. If you enjoyed the content, please rate the show and recommend it to anyone that might be interested in franchising. Make sure to visit franchiseqb.com to subscribe to my newsletter and for an actionable playbook to go from walk-on to legend in your new business. Follow us on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB and join us every week for a new episode. See you next time.
Visit franchiseqb.com to take the next step of your journey towards wealth, independence, and franchise ownership. And remember, when working for the man gets old, you must do something bold. Thank you for listening.